an old friend, Corey Benov, who was a member of my first ever Cutco office. You remember Stephen Joe, Leah Gorman, all those. Yeah. Charlie, what was his last name?
Man, those are names I haven't heard in a while. Good job.
Those are some names from 2008, dude. That's 12 years ago.
That is a while.
Uh-huh. And Corey was also a part of the team in 2009. There was a wild year. We broke a lot of records in that business. We'll talk a little bit about that because Corey was a big part of that team. And Corey Corey fights wildfires. You've been doing that for 7 years, right?
This is my 7th season. Yeah, correct.
7th season. And the reason that we have Corey on today is, number one, I think it's interesting just to hear from someone who has experience fighting fires, like what's going on right now. And the fires are pretty intense this year. So it's just an interesting conversation for us to have. But also, Corey he was accepted into an elite program that he's not technically a smoke jumper yet. And we'll talk a little about that. He got injured this year. But there's, being on the front line of fighting forest fires and being trained to be a part of elite group, there's wisdom around team building and culture, because that's a high pressure environment. So I think there's a lot to learn from any high pressure environment, working together, and some leadership principles that I think will be interesting to anybody watching. So Corey, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Ben. I'm really happy to be here. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. So if you could just actually start by sharing a little bit about what your role is. So you've been tell us a little bit about this is your 7th season. Yeah. So what have you done in fighting forest fires, and also what's next for you, right? In the path to becoming a smoke jumper.
Yeah. So I'll give you a little bit of, I guess, my history with the Forest Service. I've only worked for the Forest Service. There's other agencies you can work for, the Bureau of Land Management. You can work for the state. There's private contractors. I've only have experience with the Forest Service. When I started, my first season was in 2014. And for the next 3 years, I worked with a hotshot crew out of Montana. And those were
hot shots.
Excuse me?
Bunch of hot shots.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some interesting job titles in the firefighting world, in the wildland firefighting world. Yeah. So known as, hot shots. So yeah, that's it. And they were amazing. I couldn't think of a better 3 years to get started in the career that I've chosen. It's not typically where people start. It's kind of like a second or third step for some people. I was just really lucky, kind of like right person, right place, right time. And someone took a chance on me, which is, I think, just huge in life, right? Like you just sometimes need someone to take a chance on you to prove yourself, and then you can thrive under that situation. So fortunately, that happened, and 3 amazing years. And then after that, I took a job as a helicopter repeller in Oregon. And repellers, where hotshots deal with a lot of major, like large scale extended attack, like large campaign fires, a lot of the fires that are burning on the West Coast right now. Repellers more focus on small incidents, emerging fires, like a new lightning strike, right? And the idea is to keep it small before it gets unmanageable, and you need 2,000 people on the fire to put it out. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for, and it's quite a bit more expensive.
It adds up.
Yeah, exactly. For all of us, right? And so, higher upfront cost, but lower in the end. So I did that for the last 3 seasons before this, and then this year I was hired on with a smoke jumping base out of Montana. And I came here this spring to get started on that, and all went well until very end of the training, where I could have what you can say is like a hard fall or a hard landing technically, and that ended up tearing up my shoulder pretty good. I was able to complete the training somehow through a lot of hard-headedness and stubbornness, And so finished that. Thankfully, that step is behind me because it's a pretty intense training. It's a performance-based training. So if you're not keeping up, you're left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to finish that, but unfortunately not able to kind of break free and use that training. So this season, I've been working more in a support role. Due to COVID, it was hard to get really situated with the jumpers in like a support role there. So for the last 2 months, I've been working in dispatch, helping with logistics, communications around the forest, and basically doing a lot of PT.
Sounds good. And, 7 years in experience fighting fires, you know a lot more about them than probably most, if not everybody watching about.
Yeah, maybe.
About
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think just an interesting question is, one, what is a smoke jumper? Like, it's an elite group. It's definitely a term that has some, like some flash to it. It's like, oh shit, a smoke jumper. But like, what does a smoke jumper actually do?
Sure. They're definitely, I've always heard like wildland firefighters are doing their job when no one has heard of them. That's kind of like a joke in a way, but kind of true. However, smoke jumpers, just in our pop culture, they have a certain lore to them. And they've been around for a long time. It's, really was thought up in the 30s and 40s and got going in those times, like during World War II, the idea being that the Japanese were sending over supposedly incendiary bombs and we needed to fight these fires, so there's a long storied history. And they've just really been leaders in the fire community for a long, long time. And so it's really looked upon as like almost the highest pedestal you can get to when it comes to direct suppression of wildfire. And essentially, so as a helicopter repeller, I repelled from the helicopter into a wildfire. Smoke jumpers parachute. I don't want to say skydive because there's not really like a free fall aspect. So there is a little bit, but it's you parachute into a wildfire and then go about putting it out.
I feel like I had a toy as a kid that had like a repeller from a helicopter, like a red helicopter with some man repelling from it to go fight fire.
Yeah. It's kind of the stuff that, little boys maybe dream about, little boys and girls.
You dreamed about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. My first interaction with wildfire, because, we grew up in the Midwest and,
Barrington boy, fighting fires now.
Yeah. Well, my first interaction, like basically how I even heard about wildfire, because it wasn't known without these big fires in California near these population centers. I mean, fires have been burning throughout the Western United States since time eternity. And it's really only now that it's starting to affect such population centers is it really getting such news coverage. Mm-hmm. Like fires burn every year through Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, you name it, any Western state. But yeah, I actually ended up having like a little run in with some friends with some fireworks that got out of control and had to learn the hard way about what can happen when fireworks get on dry fuel. And through a little bit of coaching with my parents and a local fire department, I learned about wildland fire. And that was kind of the start. Then I read a couple books. I read a book on smoke jumpers and I kind of forgot about it, to be honest. But then when I wanted to more or less choose a direction in life, I went for it.
So you're paying for the sins of your childhood right now.
I guess. Hey, who hasn't played with fireworks?
That's right. Yeah, I definitely have. It's interesting. I don't know if you know much more about those the 30s and 40s, because I've heard stories of the Japanese sending over what were they doing? They were literally like parachuting incendiary devices over.
Yeah, I think the idea was like weather balloons.
Yeah.
Launched to get up in the high atmosphere, get blown over by the right winds, the right trade winds, and then essentially come down in the American West and spread havoc. I don't think it was a very successful operation. There's not many reports of that actually working, but it was a fear, and it was like at that time secret, I think, by the U.S. government because we didn't want panic, right? That the Japanese were somehow firebombing our national forest, but we needed more of a resource, I think, to get these remote wildfires out. And that's one of the reasons that people were experimenting with it.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah,
that's a very creative war tactic.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, different times.
So the fires are crazy this year, huh?
Yeah, it's definitely a big year for more than one region. In the wildland firefighting world, there's different regions, right, that kind of handle their own business, and then interagent. There's like an interagency factor too, where all regions are working together. And it's not uncommon. Like in 2017, probably a lot of people wouldn't know, here in Montana and Idaho, it was a major fire season. Like, hundreds of thousands of acres, millions of acres. I'm not exactly sure the numbers, but just really, really big. But when it's multiple regions, like right now, you have the whole West Coast was basically erupted in massive, huge wildfires. It's really a wow factor.
Yeah, this year, I heard the other day that, so it's California's worst year for acreage burned ever.
Yeah.
The previous worst year was 2018. I don't have the numbers, but it's twice as much land has been burned this year so far.
Which is crazy, because I remember 2018 being a big year. Yeah. And,
we're not, like, when is fire season, right? Because
good question. I think that has changed a little bit. If you talk to like the old timers, where, fire season maybe just was June through September or something like that. But now we get on, I work seasonally, and typically work from sometime in April to sometime in October is the standard tour, so to speak. But there's opportunities. There's more and more opportunities to get winter work now that, Northern California especially has a really late season with some of the winds that can come in October and November can really fuel a lot of the fires, and so it seems like it's long. There's work down in the Southeast in the winter. Wildfire is really just a part of our environment, and we need to realize that, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing, is that in the West, there are certain trees that, like, the cones don't actually pop their seeds out or whatnot unless the temperature it's actually part of the ecosystem. Yeah, there are ecological benefits and to wildfire, and it's really a forest way to recycle in our national forests. And every forest ecosystem, I don't have fire ecology background, but I just depending on the forest, it might need to burn like every 25 or every 100 years to, there's just different based on the composition of the forest. And I'm not I don't know much about that stuff. But you're there to fight them if you. Yeah, exactly. My job is to put them out when they tell me. Yeah. And so tell me, what is it? So like a smoke jumper, all right, the guys that you're dispatching for and working with, how do they get called onto a fire, and what do they do when they get there? Like, how are they actually fighting a fire? Yeah. So I don't, have that direct experience, unfortunately, due to the injury. Next year, just got to work my butt off. But you've worked with them, you've been on the front lines. Yeah. I've definitely been on fires with smoke jumpers, and, my other job as a repeller for the last 3 seasons, very similar. The idea with like an aerial delivered resource is whether through a lookout or a spotter plane, like sometimes they run detection flights. It's just a small plane that's flying out looking for smokes. And we basically, a small fire gets identified, that bell goes off, and you get ready, get all checked up,
get in the aircraft, helicopter, or airplane, and then you go fly to the fire and scout it up, size it up from the air. You're talking to the local unit, asking them, what are your needs? What are your, you want this fire suppressed? Okay, to suppress this fire, we'd recommend putting out 8 smoke jumpers or 4 repellers or a helitac crew. And it's essentially, you get on the ground and you start fighting that fire. You hike to the fire, whether if you arrived, because sometimes you can't land right next to it, and you get to work.
And what does that even mean? Because like I really don't know much about fighting fires. It's like, oh, a firefighter, they have a hose, they plug it into the fire hydrant, and they they put it out. But that's you don't have that in the wilderness. So
water's great, and it definitely works. We all know that, but it's not always around. Mm-hmm. Now there are tools we use like pumps to get water to hard to reach places. But the whole soak, stir thing will work if you take out the soaks, if you just stir it enough. And so you get to the fire and we essentially dig fire line around it. Think hiking trail, right? Like you just dig a hiking trail around the fire, removing the fuel for the fire to consume. We also work a lot with chainsaws. There's a lot more stuff out there in the woods than just sticks and grass on the ground. So we got to cut trees out of the way. Fire climbs trees. And so got to cut down sometimes trees that are on fire as long as it's safe. And so that's like the direct way you just kind of encircle the flaming front, the fire with fire line. And
that's the primary strategy, is like taking the fuel away.
Exactly. Directly. We're going to walk along this fire's edge and just work right next to it, slowly anchoring in somewhere where fire can't burn or is already burned. Like if it's already burnt once, it normally doesn't burn twice. Reburns are possible if it doesn't fully consume, but typically you start there and you just, it's a lot of hard work. It's at the end of the day, it is a manual labor job. And then once you get around the fire, then we call it mopping up. And it's essentially just stirring the earth. Hopefully if you have water, it moves quicker, but if not, you just stir embers and flame until it's out, and you got to touch it with your hands and make sure it's out. And you do that to like a 2 or 3 dinner plate area. And then when you're done, you move on to the next spot. And for a fire that's, the August complex up in Northern California is 800 something thousand acres. Like it's a lot of dinner plates.
Yeah. I guess this is a good fire detection tool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Technology.
Ouch. Oh no. Yeah. So that's at the end of the day. Like when we go put out a fire, when we IA a fire, the smoke jumpers I assume the smoke jumpers do this, but with the repellers, we call it hands and knees, and everyone gets on their hands and knees and we crawl over every inch of that fire, touching everything, sticking our hands into the soot. Cause fire will stay burning a foot or 2 under the ground. And if you leave it there and the right conditions present themselves, it will come out and reburn and start, keep burning somewhere else.
Yeah. The other day we were chatting and you were like, sometimes a fire will survive the winter, right? Like it'll burn underground like all winter underneath the snow or whatnot and actually come back the next year.
Yeah. As long as it's just got just enough oxygen, it's possible. Like
what's it burning down there? If it's like 2 feet down.
Duff. It's like we call it duff. It's a combination of just like, as things start to compost down, and then eventually they're going to become dirt down when they get low enough. Well, in between there's steps where there's still organic material in there, and organic material burns. Mm-hmm. And so as long as there's enough oxygen, I remember last year, I can't remember the name of the fire, but we were fighting it in the fall. And then I come back the next spring, and we got missions to drop water on it from our helicopter. And I was like, wait, that fire is still going? Like, yeah, unfortunately it survived. And it didn't end up picking picking up
You
steam
know,
and doing
yeah.
much the next year because it had already more or less been contained, but there's still smoke showing on it after a year, after a winter, which is wild.
Should have stuck that arm a little deeper down, huh?
I know, right? Well, some of these fires that get so big, you'll never have someone putting their hands over every place of the fire. We just don't have the manpower.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's the thing that's being experienced this year, right? So these fires that are more intense, that are burning hotter, right?
yeah.
How does that change the equation for how you fight a fire? Right? These fires that are burning hotter than a normal fire, so there's a lot more intensity to the flame.
Yeah, I think the number one tactic when you're having such a intense year, temps are so high and our relative humidities are so low, and fire behavior can be so explosive. An indirect strategy is most often utilized, and that's when you back away from that fire's edge and you're almost constructing a fire barrier away from the fire. And then you light a fire. The idea being you can light a fire in advance of that flaming front so that those two fires meet and extinguish themselves. And
Fascinating.
yeah, it takes more communication, more coordination. You got a lot of resources working together to make sure that we can box in this fire. And yeah, when you have a fire with 2,000 people on it, there's a whole lot of organization that must take place.
Yeah, let's get into that in a minute because I'm curious to hear more about that. And before we do, again, we mentioned that fires are a part of the environment, right? They're a part of the ecosystem. And so when you were talking the other day about how trees actually have these defense mechanisms to fight the fires themselves, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting if you could share a little bit about that, and then also how those defense mechanisms don't work when the fires are more intense like they are right now.
Sure. So yeah, we were talking about, and I mentioned it briefly. You have surface fire, right? There's fire on the ground. It's burning all the sticks that have accumulated. Well, as it comes to a tree, it's going to try and, fire that convective heat, I believe, wants to rise up the bark. And it's going to start moving up the bark. Well, certain trees have evolved so that as that bark starts to burn, they'll slough off that burning bark. And it's amazing to watch. It really is that tree fighting that wildfire by itself, saying, hey, get off me in a way. And that's, just that bark being consumed, but then the tree flinging it off to it falling off with a little help from gravity. And because a tree can survive. We've all we've walked around in the woods and you see trees. They're blackened on the bowl of the tree, and it's fine. That tree's doing just fine. It's when the tree gets fire up in the crown, in the leaves or in the needles, where that tree is getting its oxygen and moisture from, that tree is going to die. And one way that these mature stands, if they're just in a mature stand and it's just like a bunch of, say, 100-foot tall trees, and there's not a lot of small trees, lots of these trees that have evolved over time to fight wildfire themselves in a way, they'll do okay. The problem is there's also a lot of ladder fuels in the forest, and that's small or medium-sized trees that aren't as adept, aren't as mature, can't fight fire themselves as well. And so surface fire climbs up the smaller tree to maybe a medium tree, and then all of a sudden it's catching the dry needles in a mature stand on fire. And then once you have fire up in the crown, it becomes extremely difficult to fight, and with little wind can move very, very quickly.
So then the fire starts spreading in the tops of the trees.
It can, yeah. We call that crown fire, and it can move dependently. It's normally dependent on surface fire. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like a pyramid moving across. So it needs a little bit of ground fire. The heat rises, it cures out everything above it, and then things catch on fire. But it's possible under the right conditions with the right amount of wind for fire to spread. I've seen fires where the crown fire, the fire in the canopy, is 150, 200 feet ahead of where there's surface fire. And it's like, we're fighting surface fire over here, but yet it's only a matter of time before gravity takes the firebrand down, and then, our work's for naught. So it becomes very difficult to fight. You kind of need aviation.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, because like when you walk through a redwood forest, I've always wondered, like, why aren't there branches lower down? But that must just be how they evolved.
That's one of their natural abilities. Yeah. The more branches that are at those, like, kind of, it's like there's steps essentially. What's a step for you and I, right? We want to climb that tree, is also a step for fire to bounce. And so some you'll see it. Some types of trees will have limbs going up the whole thing. Others don't. But yet while they're growing, they do. But then eventually they kind of lose them. They slough them off.
That's a defense mechanism. That's
exactly. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and to your point, that's where my curiosity originally came from. It's like, oh, if I could get up there, it'd be so cool to climb that tree. Well, how come there are no branches down here?
Yeah. Part of that is that tree over time has evolved to know that that's a defense mechanism against fire.
Wow. Nature. That's wild.
Don't ask me to go into all the things that nature.
That's enough. That's enough for us on that. So 2,000 people fighting a fire, right? A lot of different organizations working together, different units, different groups. What are some of the like foundational core teamwork, leadership principles that are present in fighting fires? Like, what are the like commandments of communication and leadership in that world?
Yeah, I think obviously leadership and communication are paramount. I can't think of two other buzzwords that are more important. A good leadership group, and that, from the top down is just so important. Giving good, clear objectives. What's our task, our purpose, and our end state? Like, right? Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how are we going to do it? And what's it going to look like when we're done? Mm-hmm. And then that just being passed down from the top to, leaders at every level, right? Because we've got different experiences, or there's different experience at each level. And so you've got like a group that's represented by a much more experienced firefighter who's helping newer firefighters or less experienced guys or gals, do that work. And so your command presence is very important. Like, can I trust this person, right? Because we're out in the woods. It's inherently a hazardous job. There's a lot of, risk mitigation that takes place to make it a safe job, in my opinion. Like the most firefighter fatalities happen on roads, driving to and from incidents.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I think I think that's a good sign, right?
Civilians are the biggest danger, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And so it just making sure that your resources have a good mission, right? Like, we know all how to stir up fire. How are we going to do it? And that command presence is huge, just huge, that you come off confident and know what you're talking about. And then go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
On the communication side, I mean, I really feel like obviously too much communication can be a detractor, negative, but I think communication, just the sharing of information, is so important, because what one person takes for granted might be a total day changer for another. And so, nowadays, most people have radios, depending on your resource and who you are. But just constant communication with adjoining resources, constant communication with aerial resources. Like whenever an incident gets larger, we call it what's called an air attack. And that's essentially a plane just doing circles in the sky. And he's, our bird in the sky, calling out things, monitoring fire behavior, just trying to give as much of a picture to people so that we can do our job safely.
So what I was going to ask is like, what's it like being on the front lines of a fires, working with others? And I just imagine there's a sense of like camaraderie from like doing the work together. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're doing. If you have a mission and you're working together towards it, there's like, it feels really good, whether it's in
Absolutely.
sales or you're building something together in a company or you're fighting fires. But I feel like I just assume in a high pressure environment, there's like this like primal camaraderie that would get created. What's that like?
Yeah, there is some primal camaraderie, and it's huge within your unit, within your resource, but there can definitely be that primal ego and competition too with adjoining resources. Like it's hard because we get really close. Like, right, like when I was on the hotshot crew, it is a full-on summer job. You are gone 14 days on a fire, then you're back for 2 days, and you do it all over again. And every day you're working, hopefully 15 to 16 hours a day is kind of like the max you can work, 16 hours. And so you spend a lot of time with about 20 guys and girls. And so you better get close. You better have crew cohesion and camaraderie in that unit. That being said, when your value is often determined, like I need to be able to see how much hard work you can do. I want to know that you're not going to slow us down, that you're not the weakest link in the chain. Sometimes other resources can like, oh, I don't know who they are. Can they keep up? Like, are they as good as us? Or are they a liability? Do I have to worry about them? And so there is a whole lot of crew cohesion and camaraderie, but it takes a different kind of person, I would say, and different kind of communication to be able to bring adjoining resources, perhaps from I don't know, just like different states, right? Like, or different cultures within the states, different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? We're very different people all coming together to tackle one cause. And that's, I like one of the benefits of, I know with smoke jumping and rappellers is like working more of an independent resource. You're working together with a lot more resources and relying a lot more on like, yeah, hey, let's bring a bunch of different resources together to kick this fire's butt, right?
Yeah. You mentioned like ego can get in the way out there. Like what?
Sure.
Tell me more about that. Like how does ego get in the way of?
Well, I think you just got a lot of type A, strong, bullheaded personalities who think that going out in the woods and fighting fire direct is like a great idea and what they want to do with their time.
Yeah.
And so, you can just get some strong personalities, some really strong personalities. And I think navigating those, the people skills, the intrapersonal skills, they are huge for avoiding confrontation. Because when two people are like, hey, I know how to put out this fire. No, I know how to put out this fire. It's rare that anything would arise, but there's definitely, we're working out here with a lot of natural born leaders and a lot of people who like they're leading, right? Like you're not leading, I'm leading. And that being said, like it's a very clearly defined org structure. Who your superior is, and it's, you're not going to fight like that or anything, but it's important to have that clear org structure and communication, because I think, you're just dealing with strong, interesting, strong-willed people.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think people experience that in every team. So
yeah, totally.
I'm surprised it's present there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. In like any high stress environment, like you've talked about, whether it be in sales, you're going to get those people who are like, hey, this is the way we're going to do it. And I think that's, to be able to manage that and succeed in that environment takes a unique person. Obviously you can train to do better in that role. Yeah, I love it. I'm addicted to it.
Yeah. It also helps not to take those people not take what they say personally, right?
No, yeah. I mean, we're all, like you were saying, we're all out there to do one job together,
Right.
and we're all on the same team.
So Corey, I think people watching would love to hear, and I would love to hear, one of your wildest stories or two from being on the front lines fighting fires.
Sure.
It's like a time that really stands out as like, holy shit, this was a firefighting moment.
Yeah.
Moment where, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can be really so diverse. Wildland firefighting, it is these ass kicking days where, all I can remember from the last week is like how much my hands hurt. They're just aching from digging, and how tired my shoulders are from sawing. Right. And so there's a lot of those memories when these fires are just like when you're going from one fire to the next and you're like, what was the name of that fire? But I would say, like, I'll give you the story of my first fire. I basically got on a hotshot crew. I was extremely lucky to do so. Our first dispatch is up to the Kenai Peninsula in Alaska. And yeah, little known fact, Alaska will burn every year. They had a big year last year, massive year. And so we're hiking in I remember the name, the Funny River Fire.
The Funny River Fire.
The Funny River Fire on the Kenai Peninsula. And we're hiking in on this massive fuel break. Fuel break was made by machinery, excavators, masticators. I mean, it's like logging equipment, right? And essentially just taking the woods down to mulch and dirt, and then bringing it over with dozers. I mean, it's essentially you're creating a big highway between the fire and where it wants to go. And so we hike in, it's soaking wet, right? Like the ground up in Alaska is often, there's like ice, you dig deep enough, and there's a raging fire. I'm like, what the hell? Like I'm jumping around puddles here. We're often just walking right through puddles because we're walking in a single file line, not puddles. It's like you're walking in the tundra of Alaska. I'm amazed it's even burning out here when I'm walking through mud and water. And we get out there, we're briefing, and all of a sudden a helicopter comes and just drops. Like a Type 1 helicopter is a large helicopter, can have over more than 1,000 gallons of water. Just drops right on our briefing, soaks all of us. Most of the radios go out. And I don't know, like everyone's like looking up. The helicopter was like, is that on purpose? We're really not that close to the fire's edge right here. Yeah. And so most of the radios go out. And then in like the next moment, I watched this like 100+ flaming front just bend over with a little bit of wind. And it just blew a bunch of fire embers over across this fuel break that we were trying to hold the fire on. And it was like, all right, get to work. And we just went around for like the next 24 hours, just chasing spot fires. One good way up there is to just cut off like a pine bough off a tree, and you can just swat out fire that's right on the surface that hasn't like got down deep. So you can just swat out a fire. And so we were just, with organization running around, just swatting out all these spot fires. But I remember that flaming front so distinctly, like approaching this massive fuel break. I was like, how the heck is it gonna breach this? And then just the wind picked up and the flames went like that. And then just, you watch these big firebrands, just the energy from that thing throwing embers hundreds of yards across essentially an area that cannot burn anymore. But I mean, firebrands will get up in the atmosphere and blow for miles and miles.
That's a good welcome to fighting fires moment.
Oh yeah, it was.
Welcome, Corey.
Yeah. But that was my first fire. I feel lucky to have a first fire like that. Yeah. And then lucky? Yeah, it was wild. It was a wild time. So like those moments stand out. And then some like the other moments are just the sheer beauty of it. Another thing I really remember from my days on the hotshot crew was we were 3 hours away from going unavailable. Basically, the crew is going to disband. We're going to go home for the winter. Good season, everybody. And there was a fire in the Bob Marshall Wilderness at that outside the town of Augusta, Montana. And that town has kind of had bad memories with a late season fire with winds picking up. And so like, we want to get someone out on there. We go out to the ranger station, hiking the next day. This is 3 hours from like thinking I'm all on my own to we spend the next month out there, no cell phone service. And it's, I love the unpredictability of it, that I can be 3 hours away from being free, but then nope, you got a whole nother winter or month left of work in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. We wake up every morning, there's fresh grizzly bear tracks around our tents. Like just some of the more beautiful places we have in this beautiful country that people just don't get to go. Not that we don't get to go to, we all can. They're just hard to get to, and not on a trail. So that's a lot of the things that stand out. It's just the sheer beauty of our country.
Yeah, I know this isn't how it works, but there's a part of me that's like wishes I could like join for a week.
Yeah. Well, hey, the initial, it's not like urban firefighting. There's not a long school you got to do. You got to take some bare bones classes, not bare bones, but they teach you the basics. Yeah. And then it's a lot of on the job stuff. So yeah.
All right.
Someday
maybe I'll, I mean, that would be super cool. Honestly, I'd love something like that.
Yeah.
And, crazy story about the fires. I went to some hot springs about a month ago in Oregon, Brayton Bush Hot Springs. Amazing place. Yeah. So
hard. It was hard for me to make a reservation. I've tried to go there, but I never had enough. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, nice. I know. So it was my first time taking a week to myself in 8 years.
Money.
I've 2 daughters, family, so grown a business. And I had a really amazing experience. I was one of the first people to go to it that was opened in the COVID era.
Oh, okay.
They did a great job with their distancing, masks on if you're not in the tubs, 1 person per tub, alcohol sanitization spray so that, it felt really safe and clean.
Yeah.
And I just had an amazing week that was just super rejuvenating for me. I haven't, up in the redwoods there, old growth trees. There's a river running through the hot springs. So you can jump into the cold river, jump back into it was perfect for me. Like that's my favorite. And 2 weeks later, all of the guest cabins burned down in one of the fires in Oregon.
You're joking. That's news to me, man. That's news to me.
Yeah, I know. So it's just, I was like, 1, that was a close call. Like I was just there.
Sure.
And 2, the fires this year, like they always have a real impact, but that just like had it really hit home. I was like,
sure.
Man, that's a place I loved. And I was, Cassie and I, being so busy the last few years, we didn't take a honeymoon. And so we're taking our honeymoon finally, October 8th.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And our plan was to go to Brayton Bush. And I was like, so hoping for the best with them rebuilding.
Yeah.
I'm sure amazing place, amazing people.
Cool.
And just had it really hit home, the impact of the fires for me.
Yeah. I think that's what's happening is a lot of these fires are starting to hit home for a lot more people.
Mm-hmm.
So awareness is spreading.
Yeah. So 2 more things I want to talk about here, Corey.
Yeah. First
one is one of the perks of being in firefighting is you get an off season, right?
Yeah.
And for the last, being your friend, watching you, chatting every once in a while, you've spent a lot of time in Mongolia, of all places, right?
Yeah.
And you have posted some crazy pictures like yak's milk and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But you went there originally as a part of the Peace Corps, is that right?
Yeah, correct.
And you've gone back a bunch. How many times have you been there? And like, what do you love about Mongolia?
Yeah, I've just gone back once. I was hoping to go back this winter, but COVID is going to prevent that. I really wanted a trip in Asia, but yeah, I after we were working together with Vector selling Cutco, that was kind of next on my goal list, and I didn't share that with many people. but I had just an amazing time in Mongolia, you know, for a kid from the suburbs of Chicago.
Going to summer camp every summer.
Well, you know, I didn't really do a whole lot of that. No. So,
No, summer camp, the music festival.
oh yeah. Good memory. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Taking it back. Yeah. 10KLF and whatnot. Yeah. Just, I think more of like the environment, the hustle and bustle, the rat race or whatnot, that I really have never been truly a part of, but you hear about it. I hear friends talk about it. Just moving to Mongolia and moving into a Mongolian yurt called a ger and living there for 2 years, working in business development was just so mind blowing and just opened my mind to what it takes to be really happy and what you need. You know, when you don't have running water and you have an outhouse that you got to take care of.
You got to take care of your own outhouse.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it kind of changes your priorities, I guess. And I couldn't before, you know, I was like, what do I want to do in life? Like, I love sales. You know, I really enjoyed those years with Cutco. And it taught me a lot about myself.
You weren't bad at it.
Yeah, there was some success, which makes it more enjoyable. You know, so I was like, shirt and tie life in the city of Chicago, making as much money as a human can make that's my dream. But I've always wanted to do the Peace Corps, and I feel like I need to give back in some way, and I get to travel this way too. Let's do this. But there, it just like something switched when I was there. Just the love of language learning, of long-term being abroad, long-term, and just soaking up a country and culture. It bit me hard, Ben, as you've seen
as I've seen.
As you've seen. Yeah. The benefits of firefighting is we generally work seasonally, and you know, it's no plush lifestyle in the summer. Like I said, it's 14 days on.
It's like a Cutco summer.
Yeah, exactly. We do the same hours a normal person would do all year. You know, obviously not if you've got a really demanding job that's working 60, 70 plus hours a week for most of the year. But if you're working a 40 to 45 hour job, we do the same in 5 months. But the benefit is, you know, I get typically told I'm free to go for the winter and few responsibilities, if any. So I've been fortunate enough to see a lot more of this beautiful world, just a little bit.
You earn it. You have to earn it. You work for it.
Yeah, I do. It's fun.
Well,
I think we all deserve those kind of experiences.
Absolutely.
I just, I'm lucky to have the opportunity that I can step away.
Yeah. Lucky, and you've chosen that, you know?
Yeah. That was definitely, it was definitely a part of the reason why I wanted to move into it.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've always just respected about you is, you know, success means different things to different people, right? Like, and I think it's important for people to have their own definition of like, what is success for me? And, you know, I believe it's really about, well, what do you want? What do you really care about? What matters to you? And are you doing those things? Are you using the time in this life to do the things that you want, that you care about, and that matter to you?
Yeah.
And not everybody does that. You know, some people feel stuck in the rat race and they don't actually give themselves the space or the permission to even answer the question. It's like, what do I want?
Totally.
In my role, I ask people, what do you want, all the time? It's the most important question that I ask. Yeah. And sometimes people's answer is all the shit that they don't like or don't want, or that's broken or wrong or needs to be fixed, or that's wrong with the world.
Yeah.
And I actually think that's one of the greatest opportunities for like our time, is for us to not be asking the question of what's wrong, what's broken, what needs to be fixed, what are all our problems. And we want to be aware of that, but for like as individuals and then more collectively be like, what do we want? You want to go live in Mongolia and live off the land? Like, you can do that.
You can do that.
we want to be a better country, better society, have a better relationship to the planet, like we can do that, but we have to answer that question of what we want.
You have to answer that question and then do it.
And then do
Like,
it.
get off, not
Mhm.
necessarily the couch, right? But just do it. And we're
Do something.
we're very fortunate in this country. You have unlimited potential.
Yep.
The money in your bank account, just like the currency, what type of currency it is, and that passport you got in your pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, we have such a blessing, a gift.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like I need to take advantage.
Get me fired up, Corey.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
So in closing here, I'm curious, when you think back to 2009, right? And our time together working, actually go back a little further. I'll start here. What did you learn in sales? And in our year in 2009, like it was a remarkable year in the Cutco world. We did 30% more business than ever has been done before. We didn't have like a veteran team. We did it completely with 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
We recruited over 300 of them, Corey.
Yeah.
We trained them to sell Cutco.
Yeah, that was a major operation.
Yeah. And our biggest week is still the biggest week in company history.
Which was, when you told me that record had stuck, I was like, wow, no way. That's awesome.
Well, that was
that makes me feel special.
It is special, and it should. And you were a huge part of it, man. Like, you interviewed and recruited most of those people.
Yeah.
So we had a great team. And the interesting thing about our team is that none of us were experienced. Well, Mike Muriel knew what he was doing, but the rest of us, it was like our first, that was your first management experience.
Yeah.
Felice, Richard, right? Like it was all of our like first time on that platform. But when you think back to that time, what did you learn that has stuck with you, or how did that prepare you for who you are today?
Yeah. You want me to speak more about that year in that management role, or just sales in general?
I think that year.
That year?
Yeah. Or whatever's coming to you,
Yeah. I'll start with just like sales in general. It was huge for me. I don't want to get into it too much into the weeds, but like as a kid, I mean, I wouldn't even pick up the phone to call for a pizza. I could not do that. And I think, naturally as I matured and grew into my own in high school and then in college, starting in college, sales really was the first time where I got to call strangers, right? And feel comfortable about it. And just that repetition, doing those slides was huge for me. As well as kind of what you do in the face of adversity. You're not always going to get that sale. It's not always going to go well. How do you respond?
Yeah.
Do you, and I'm facing some adversity right now with with this injury that I've got. It's a major shoulder injury.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a lot of hard work to get back to the physical condition I need to be to do my job. And it's just like, well, what do you do in the form of that pressure when things are not going according to plan? Do you fold, or do you attack? And
you figure it out. Do you get creative? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think like that was my first interaction with that. Like, oh, things are not going well. Things are not going as I saw.
Champions find a way.
Yeah, exactly. And so like those are some of the fundamentals from just sales that really paid off and continue to. I think in terms of that year in management, I really liked how hard we could all work together to like just accomplish something great. I mean, it was the first time where I was taking more of that, as a Cutco rep, you're just on your own, essentially, right? Like, I mean, you're working in a team and you're helping motivate each other, but the sales is up to you. And so being a part of what you had there, leading that office, was really special. And, I really got addicted in a way also to the ability to control, like, hey, I know if I bust ass for this amount of time, that's like, 80% of my effort, right? And the rest of, the rest of the year is I can still continue to work, but I'm going to work just as hard and only get 20% of the return. Mm-hmm. And for me, like you talked about finding happiness, I was okay with that 80%, and letting go of the other 20%. So I think just in general, my time with Cutco taught me like how much you could be rewarded through like hard work and make yourself happy.
That is interesting that it's like you're kind of doing Cutco summers now, but
in a way, yeah, it is. It's I'm going to put in all the hard work right now to do all the things that I want to do.
So 2 more questions on this.
Yeah,
one is, when you think back to 2009, like it really was a magical year. Like we captured lightning in a bottle in a number of ways. And when you think back, just from your perspective, what do you think were the things that existed in our culture, in our team, or the way that we approached leadership that allowed us to perform at such a high level? Like what sticks about that?
I think the number one thing was just like instilling belief in a lot of, we all remember those first years. We're like, wait, what am I doing? I'm going to take this to someone's house and sell them this. But just like instilling that belief in people, and then encouraging them like, oh yeah, hey, and what you think is possible with this belief isn't 5% of what is possible. And setting these crazy goals, right? Like it's absurd, it's obscene. Why would we set this goal? We'll never do it. Holy crap, we did 95% of our goal. And which you would never reach if you set what seems like a normal modest goal. And I think that is what I remember. It was just, you can really push yourself and push people as long as they're willing to buy into, hey, we're doing something special here and we're going to go places no one has gone before. You just got to believe, baby.
Yeah.
You gotta believe.
It's so funny, but like my answer is the same. It's like we believed in our people more than probably any other managers did across the country.
And it's infective, like, I don't know. Everyone picks up on it and it spreads like a disease.
And the other interesting thing I'll say about that is we had huge goals.
Yeah.
But even more than that, we were asking the question of, well, what's possible? It's like, let's find out. Like, whether we hit the goal or not, like, let's just figure out what's possible. And I think that really brings the best out in people. And it's not like, hey, this is what success is, but it's like, no, what's possible if I just give my best?
Yeah.
Simple as it may sound. If that's what your focus is, like, I'm just going to be my best and see what's possible, then you find out.
Yeah. And the belief that your best is yet to come, right? Like we've got more. Oh, that was good. I believe that, but you've got more. And I know you've got more.
Yeah, there's a saying that I love and I say a lot, which is so simple. It's just, hey, it's just the tip of the iceberg.
I love it.
Just the tip of the iceberg, baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Last question.
All right.
So we didn't meet in 2009. We met in 2008.
That's right.
I was 19, running my first Cutco office, and I looked ridiculous. I had like long surfer hair. I was wearing like my dad's suit that didn't fit me.
I remember this
office in a parking lot. Like, why the heck did you ever trust me?
I think because like kind of what we were just talking about, Ben, you had just belief. You had just sheer belief that this is going to work. And it's more than just blind optimism, right? Like, oh, everything's going to go well. Everything will take care of itself. It's just, no, things are going to go well. And this is how we're going to make things go well. And yeah, I think they're infectious attitudes. People flock to that. They're able to put aside their self-doubt and push themselves to heights that they didn't know were possible when they're led by people like that. And so I just think, man, you got it. It's like that X factor where you can, just inspire people. And it's that kind of thing that I think all leaders benefit from is, hey, like I was talking about command presence, right? That's what we call it at work. But can I trust this person? And it's different at my work, but can I trust this person with my safety and this plan? Are they giving me these verbal and nonverbal cues that make me want to follow this person into a potentially hazardous situation in my job? But it can be applied to the workplace where you don't have to worry about a tree falling in your head, but you do have a lot of stressors, right? And a lot of goals.
Are bringing knives into strangers' homes.
It's true. That was true.
Well, yeah. Awesome. Well, Corey, I think we'll wrap here. And I just want to say thanks for this conversation today.
Thank you, Ben.
And just a lot of great memories, man. When I think back across, 2009 was super formative for a year. Like it changed my life. Like,
yeah, absolutely. I will always have that memory.
If it wasn't for that year. And, in a lot of ways I was like at the front and the figurehead, but we had a great team, and nothing like that happens without a great team. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm just grateful to share that experience and stay connected. And thanks for all you shared with everybody today, man. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben. I appreciate you having me on here. It was special. So thank you.